Hi everyone, and thanks for joining us today on the first episode of Hort Talk, an HTA podcast, where I am joined with two very special guests to talk about mental health and well-being. Now I'm going to let them introduce themselves.
Hi Alex, hi Annabelle. My name's Martin Hilton. I'm Director of Learning and Education at CPL Learning. We create lots of learning activities, principally in the hospitality and retail industry, but in a broader span across other sectors as well. And I think in relation to today's activity, I've always been very passionate about sort of mental health and personal resilience. And the role it plays within hospitality in particular, and working with young people. So I work, as well as working with CPL, I work with universities, so I lecture at university, and I've done lots in the leadership space. And I've also published in resilience in hospitality. So delighted to be involved today, and thanks for the invite.
Hi everyone, I'm Annabelle Padwick, and I'm the founder and director of Life at Number 27, which is a gardening and wellbeing therapy organisation. I've done all sorts of things at different shows and things, so I've done lots with the HTA before in the past. I'm also a children's author of a Grow Your Own Food book, and I write monthly for Kitchen Garden magazine. So that's just a little bit of what I do every month. So yeah, it's great to be here.
So I'm going to kick off with a question. It seems quite deep, but let's just dig right into there. So Martin, Annabelle, when we talk about mental health and well-being, what do we mean? Why is that important? And what does that mean to you both?
Shall I kick off? It is a biggie to start with, isn't it? It's massive, isn't it? And thank goodness over the last few years, a lot more light is being shined upon the whole topic, I think, which is great. But I suppose in thinking about today's session, I sort of thought about the words mental health and mental well-being, and straight away there's almost a resistance or a feeling about them. But if you really translate them, if you think about, first of all, from the positive perspective, mental well-being, I kind of thought, it's about being confident, isn't it? It's about feeling comfortable and motivated and having that sense of contentment almost. And the other side of it, when we're maybe not feeling so good and the mental health isn't as we'd like it to be, then it's a different set of emotions. It's about being sort of feeling probably worried, probably feeling slightly irrational in our decision making, maybe feeling at risk, sort of anxious, tired and lethargic. And when you put those words into it, you start to realize how common mental health problems are. And if we can get the dialogue more into day-to-day speak rather than sort of the stigmatized sort of mental health or mental difficulties, then I think, which I think is happening, by the way, I think we can really shine the torch on it more and more. And that's what it sort of means to me, if that helps kick us off.
Absolutely. I was going to say, I suppose in terms of what it means to me, I suppose in a weird way, it's everything. To me, mental health, it's me day in, day out. It's been my own personal journey, and I use the word journey a lot, and I know it's a word people love or hate, so apologies if you're in the hate club of the word journey. But I suppose it's my own mental health experiences have totally changed my entire life. I'm definitely a different person now than what I was because of what I've been through and the way my brain has handled different things, the way my mind has wandered across through the experiences I've been through. And then also, I suppose, day in, day out, I work with people, providers that are struggling with mental ill health, supporting them, helping to build their mental health and get them either more confident, more resilient, more comfortable in themselves, giving them a chance to have a safe space where they can be themselves without that worry of judgment that might then change. They adapt their personality to fit in, or being with pressures on social media or things like that, I suppose. So it encompasses what I do day in, day out. But it's interesting then, though, that as you were talking, Martin, and I was thinking about the question that I suppose when we do talk about nowadays, we're talking about it a lot more, which is amazing.
Yeah.
But when we do talk about it now, it seems to be a thing. It's very much around mental ill health,
yes.
not mental health as a whole. And actually, sometimes it's like we kind of raise that stigma of talking about it. But then actually, if we talked about it more on the other side of things, so if you start saying, oh, I'm really confident, I'm really resilient, I'm really strong, I feel really content, then there's always that barrier of that as well, that if you talk about having positive mental health and feeling well too much, then that seems to be a bad thing that seems to be a negative thing as well. If you talk about too good about yourself, how good you're feeling. So it's quite an interesting one. It'd be great if we could, I suppose, for me, if we could talk about it like just generally across the spectrum. When we talk about mental health, we're talking about both positive and negative, and bringing both those experiences of ill health and great feelings of positive well-being about them both in equal measure. So actually it's not seen as a negative thing to say I'm feeling really good actually at the minute, or I'm feeling really strong and resilient. Just that's okay to say as it is to say, do you know what, actually I'm feeling really rubbish, I'm feeling not confident, I feel like I've totally lost myself and I don't know what I'm doing with myself. They should be sort of on the same sort of level. I suppose that's where my brain's gone over just listening to you, Martin, and reading that the question.
So the last 18 months has been a really crazy time for us all. We've all been through a lot of pressure, lots of change in both work, socially. What do you think that impact has been? Do you think that has accelerated things more than they may have done normally? What's your take on that?
I'll go. I suppose in terms of the impact it's had, I think it's devastating. If I'm totally honest, I think the impact on people's mental health has been horrific. I think some people have really struggled, and it depends on where people. So for example, some people I think have actually it's not been so bad because everyone's in different situations. Some people have been able to sort of keep their jobs, and it's just they might have changed the setting, so it's gone to a home setting. Then actually that can bring its own issues of isolation. You're suddenly could be potentially in a home setting trying to work, and you've got your children, you've got your partner. Normally you'd only see each other for a few hours a day, and all of a sudden you're all in this confined space with nowhere to go. That has its own issues. And then you've got other people, for example, where they could have lost their house, they could have lost their job, they could have lost absolutely everything because of the pandemic, and that can then lead to another type of mental health crisis. So I think the impact, no matter how it's impacted you physically, I think it's probably impacted most people mentally on some level, whether that is isolation, whether that is anxiety, depression, whatever spectrum. I think there's been a feeling of loss in whichever way it's affected you. I think for me personally, I think I've been on a roller coaster mentally. I'm still not off it. I think actually some people I've spoken to and my friends said they struggled at the beginning a lot, like with the first lockdown a lot more, whereas I would say I'm definitely probably finding this period here at the hardest. So it's interesting when you speak to different people. I think different points have affected people, but I think I'm still on a massive roller coaster of up and downs that I'm going to be on for a very long time until we get back to some level of normality. But I don't think it's ever going to be the same. I think it's always going to be a new normality, I think. In terms of work, it's been open, shut, which I think, and as a mental health support organisation, there's been times where we could be open probably a lot of the time, actually, especially because we're outside. It's easy to just give people their own tools. We can also socially distance because a lot of them have their own allotment plots, so we just work on different areas. That being said, though, I will always go on the side of caution. That's just me. And there's been points where they've said, where government guidelines have said we could stay open because we are mental health support and people need, especially with the increasing need of mental health support, we could stay open. But there's been points where I've actually looked and gone, actually, I don't think it's the right thing to stay open, and having to weigh up the mental health side of stuff and the physical health side of stuff is so hard, especially as the founder when it's my decision to make that call. But I think there's been at times where I've just had to make that call and gone, look at my own mental health and where I am, if I'm capable to support people, and also look at the numbers and stuff of where we've been at points and gone, do you know what, I'm not opening until things are safer. And I know I can definitely provide a more safe environment for everybody. I think So yeah, I think it's massively impacted on work. All my shows that I'd normally talk at, so all the fundraising we'd normally be able to do for the organisation, all stopped. A lot of that public speaking, talking and stuff. So half of the income has drastically changed, I think, for me and a lot of people. So yeah, it's definitely had a massive impact, where there's been times where I've gone, what am I doing? Where am I going? You're just grabbing onto opportunities because you don't actually know what's going to come to fruition when we come out of this and what's not. But yeah, I suppose in a nutshell, it's just been a hell of a roller coaster, and I think the impact is still going to keep on going. I think, unfortunately, over the next few months at least. That's my view.
Yeah. No, I totally agree, Annabelle. And I think particularly to that last point was something I was going to suggest, that I don't think we've seen the true impact yet, because I think I have a sense, in a way, you know, you can kind of, I've not originated this thought, I've heard others say it, that what we've all been through in the last almost year and a half or so is almost like previous generations' war, isn't it? It's like the world war, you know, for this generation, if you like. And I suppose as we come out of it, we're sort of, there's a sense that we're through the worst of it. And I guess, you know, when you think about the fight or flight mechanism, you know, when we're really under stress and heightened stress, literally danger to life, then actually staying alive and being alive is kind of quite a good acceptance. But as we move out of that intense, stressful period, then I think the mind then starts to reflect on, crikey, okay, well, yes, I am still alive, but look what I've lost. You know, I've lost my job, I've lost my house, I've lost 2 of my family members, I've lost, you know, whatever it might be. And I think some of the personal loss is just tragic. I mean, you know, and I think we can equate this to a world war. I mean, luckily, none of my family's been touched by COVID. But some of the stories you hear are just heartbreaking. I mean, I just could not fathom. I've got 2 daughters in their 20s. Yeah, I could not have fathomed them being in hospital in a different part of the country and not being able to go and see them. And even worse, not being able to see them before something really horrendous happened. But that's been happening to this generation. I just think that level of loss, and it's almost, it's just incredible to sort of think of, really. And I think, you know, there will be extreme mental difficulties that come out of that, you know, extreme mental illness, you know, PTSD, all the rest of it will undoubtedly follow in many cases. What I do think is good, if there is a good to it, is that I think straight from the off, when lockdown was being talked about and when, you know, everything was going on, thankfully, you know, the government and the media, and I guess all of us here, yeah, didn't play a sort of British stiff upper lip and recognize straight away that, you know, one of the biggest impacts of what we're all going to go through is mental health difficulty. And so in a bizarre way, I think it has accelerated our tolerance and understanding of mental health. So if there's any good to come of it, I think it probably is that. But bizarrely, I think, you know, as well as this realization of, well, what next after losing so much, maybe, and where do I go from here? There's also, as we go out of lockdown and back into normality, you know, that's another step out of our comfort zone. So we might all diss lockdown and slack it off and be sick to death of it, but we will have generated a comfort zone. And, you know, going back to the office, going back into busy shops, even going to the cinema, which might be a pleasant experience, might be actually quite stressful. And so I think we've got loads of challenges ahead. So I think, yes, it's been a huge 13 months, but I suspect the next 13 months will be in its own way equally tough.
So I suppose, yeah, there's that side of it, I automatically think of. And then I suppose the impact and the lessons we've learned, I think, which has been brilliant from a gardening perspective in the industry, is that so many people that didn't garden, that would never have even considered gardening, have got into gardening. And it is incredible. The gardening industry is, like, from what I've seen and the amount of brands that I work with and that I speak to regularly, they're flying. It's incredible. They can't keep up with the demand at the minute. Like, it's crazy.
3 million more gardeners in 2020.
Is it really?
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's phenomenal. The amount of people I've spoken to that said they wouldn't have even got into gardening, and all of a sudden they've got into gardening, they've messaged me and gone, oh, how'd you do this? You do gardening stuff, don't you? What do you think of this? It's like I went to primary school with them. I'm not spoken to since, but I'm on Facebook friends with them because that's what you do, and though you never see them. They've suddenly messaged me with a random picture of a question going, how'd you do this? Or I've randomly bought your book and I was wondering. Like, it's quite weird, but it's incredible. And then that goes back to, I suppose, going back to the war thing, is that I've done a lot of research into what happens in times of crisis and gardening and the links. And actually, in times of crisis, always gone back to gardening. So in the wars, they had trenches and they grew their own vegetables in the trenches because it was a way to de-stress and to grow food, but also any of those hierarchies you have within a war environment or within a military environment, I suppose, and you get them in a business setting, all those hierarchies are removed. You're all just people growing food.
Absolutely.
So it went back to, it's always been used, and it's incredible. You think that actually we've not done much. There's not been a big campaign during COVID to say we all need to get gardening and dig for victory or that type of thing. It's just a natural thing that has happened. So many people have just gone, I'm going to learn, or I'm going to pick up a plant, or I'm just going to get a house plant, or I'm just going to do something, that have just naturally picked it up and started getting into it. And I think that's what fascinates me. And I think hopefully, plants are amazing for so many reasons, and that I could talk for hours, so I won't, about plants and how amazing they could be. I think one great thing that's come out of this is that people have discovered plants and that connection to nature. They're going out for walks. And I think the gardening industry has done tremendously, and they will continue to do so if they can keep up now with the demand that's coming and stock levels and things like that. But yeah, I think there's a lot of positives that have come out of a pretty terrible time.
Yes. Yeah.
But it also had a huge positive mental impact on people. And Annabelle, you do that gardening is fantastic for mental health, and actually the government's now recognised, hasn't it, that gardening can be used as a tool for supporting mental health. Do you think we should be pushing that more? Do you think that can go even further than it is now?
That is a big question to ask. That is a question that I could talk for weeks and weeks and weeks on. And that I've sat down and spoke with NHS directors about. I've spoken with I've spoken at the big B2B sort of gardening industry events about. Like, it's a big one. I think it can help every single person in different ways. Gardening, it's incredible. It's the most basic natural healer that we've got that's there available to us for free. In terms of making it accessible, they are getting the message. Government is getting the message, and there's like, so with my organisation, for example, and with a lot of the many other incredible gardening therapy organisations, social prescribing is now coming available. They're seeing how incredible gardening, as well as sport therapy, art therapy, music therapy, those sorts of physical therapies can be great for us, because they build our confidence. Whilst we can help sort of investigate the trauma through talking therapies, they at the same time will build our confidence, build our resilience, teach us new skills, which then builds our confidence even more, gives us a place to connect and meet new people. So I think they're understanding that. The downside to it is the funding element of it. If you speak to government, they'll say that, and it's absolutely right. There's no one you can say is doing it wrong, because there isn't enough funding. So people can blame government and say they should be funding mental health support more, whether that's gardening, whether that's whatever. They can't. There's not enough fund. You could have an argument for every single pot of funding for every different service. You can't win. With NHS funding, which is where I try and get a lot of my funding from, because that's where that's where the referrals come through. They don't have the money. The NHS is struggling like incredibly right now. So to put the pressure on them to say, well, you fund it, isn't possible either. Like, you're asking for the impossible. But that's why I think I a lot of the time go down to, it's us as an industry and down to corporates and businesses where they are flourishing and doing well. It's my ask is to them to then support organisations and support people, whether that's supplying plants, whether that's supplying donations and funding, whether that's that. I think it comes down to businesses, and I've always said that, whether it's gardening industry supporting gardening therapy organisations, whether that's big football clubs sponsoring sport therapy, football therapy, whether that's the big musicians sponsoring music therapy. I think it's looking at it to people taking responsibility themselves and not blaming government or NHS and saying, you know what, actually we've got it here, why don't we just get on with it and do it instead of just talking about it. So I think, yeah, that's I'll get off the horse.
I could listen to you all day on it. I think it's brilliant.
I think in a nutshell, there's no one you can really, I think we need to do as much as we possibly can to get gardening and plants to as many people as possible in whatever way, shape and form. But I think we've got to do it as businesses and as individuals, is take that responsibility and not look to hire people because you're asking for the impossible. As much as I'd like to stand there and fight for it day in, day out, I know it's not going to happen.
And I mean, I come from a very lay perspective on obviously the horticulture industry, and so my gardening skills are pretty bad. but
how bad?
Really bad. But you know, I think it does play such a role. And you know, again, I'm looking at my garden, I can see it now, and it like there's weeds popping up everywhere, and that's bringing me down, to be honest. You know, but I know if I get a day in the garden and just pull a few weeds, make a bit of a difference, make it look cool, I will keep. I'll go upstairs to my bedroom window, I'll look out and I'll feel really good. I'll feel really proud that I've done something. And
it's a sense of achievement, isn't it?
It's totally that, Alex. I think it's totally that. And that's
whether you've pulled a weed up or trimmed a tree, or whether you've grown something, you know, from a seed or a seedling or whatever it may be, you are doing something really positive. You have that sense of achievement, and it has a huge impact when you can see that.
Yeah, like you say, it's the tending to it. It's the maybe a little bit. There's a bit that we can control within that, you know. So if we do the right things, we get a result. Whereas this last 12, 15 months, so crazy. You know, who knows? We're just out of control at times. So I don't know. Maybe I'm talking.
I think that's what it is. I think it's that going back to nature. It's where we're naturally, intrinsically supposed to be. Because weeding is a love-hate thing. Most people hate it. It's one of those things you don't want to do, right? So I always say, and it's flipping it on a positive, which is what this is all about. And is if you can put a negative thought or a negative emotion or a negative feeling onto each individual weed or a mass collection of weeds and then pull them all out, then as a visual you're pulling out all those negative emotions, those negative feelings. Or if you're really angry at somebody that day, which obviously we're not supposed to be angry with anybody, but we are. So if you're really angry with somebody that day, then just rip them out. And as you're ripping them out, it's a visual because you can see it coming out. But then at the same time, you're creating that clear space, which gives you that clarity of either to see clear more, for your mind to see more clearly, but then also for new opportunities or new plants or new things to come into that space, which was swamped with the negative stuff. So if you're struggling with getting the motivation to weed, just think of all the negative things and get out there, and the weeds will be gone quicker than you've ever weeded in your life.
That's amazing.
That's
I'm absolutely going to use that one.
I'm definitely going to do that.
Do that. But yeah, I think plants, just on one last thing, I think it's, for me, plants, as you said, we naturally go back to them. They're a daily reminder of, if we're struggling, we don't know how to look after ourselves anymore because we've got lost in this whole thing of everything, is plants need what we need. So if we get stuck, we get confused, we look at a plant and go, what does the plant need? Food, water, time, patience. It needs to stay in the same place. It doesn't like being disturbed. It needs all the exact same things we do, but then also each individual plant is different. So some will need full sun, some need shade. Cool. And just like us as individuals, we all have different needs. Some of us like shade, like me, otherwise I burn to a crisp like I have in the last few days, even though it's not baking sun. Others love the full sun. So I think that's as well, it's that if we get stuck on how to look after ourselves during this whole crisis, we get a plant and it tells us how to look after ourselves, but also it gives us back that element of control, especially when we go think, what do we want to grow this year? You can control to a degree on sort of how things grow, as long as we look after them well enough. Then also it doesn't give us total control because of the weather. So it gives us a great balance of control. So yeah, now I'm going to shum because I will keep going.
That's awesome.
That's brilliant. Yeah, absolutely fantastic. So Martin, a quick question for you. What do you think we can implement in the world of business to give greater support to employees when it comes to mental health?
I think we might have touched upon it before. It's about I remember writing something about a year ago in some trainings we were doing there about, the world of recruitment now, and the world of so HR management has changed, hopefully for the good. And I think it's going back to probably what Annabelle touched upon before about, just giving people time and respect. And if someone's not quite been as productive because of X, Y, and Z, whether that's been a barrier because of kids at home or having to nip out. One of my team yesterday, rang in all flustered saying, "Oh, my mum's had a fall and there's only me because my sister can't do X, Y, and Z." And straight away she's deferring to, I'm absent from work and I'm really, really sorry. And I'm going, just don't worry about it. Your priority is with your mum. Go and see to your mum. And we should do that as leaders from a humanistic point of view. But even if you've not got that humanistic point of view, see it as an investment, because you're going to get that back in spades.
And Annabelle, what would you suggest when it comes to your own mental health, a tip or suggestion to support your own well-being? I'm throwing these at you, I'm sorry, but I just like it. I like the pressure.
No, I like it, other than my brain just goes with 50 million things. Exactly. It's finding something, and that could be anything, that helps you express yourself. And that could be absolutely, it could be, for example, so with me, when I've not been able to garden, or where gardening's become too much work focus and I struggle to get out my own garden, then I go to knitting, or I go to lino. I've got into lino print. Cool. And it's more creative. Nice. But something that where you can express yourself. I've also got back into inline skating, which is quite hysterical. But finding something where you can express yourself and get that good feeling back in yourself, whatever it is for you. Just find something where you can express your feelings and you can express your emotion, whether that is through art, whether that's through play, whether that's through dance.
Or sourdough.
Or sourdough.
That's my bag.
Just find something where you can express yourself through that is a physical thing, because especially with a lot of physical things, there's normally there's how you go into it and then there's an outcome. So you can then look at it and how you're feeling before, how you're feeling afterwards, but also what's come out of that. So have you learned something new, which then helps build that confidence again. So I suppose that's something.
Yeah.
And I suppose, it comes back to, I suppose, just talking, whether it is a family member or whether it is an absolute stranger or whether it's a colleague. In my old career, a colleague that now has become a really close friend, but was a colleague at the time that I'd been in one or two big meetings with, had never spoken about anything, changed my total life. Without him having a conversation and going, "Are you okay?" Because he had heard about through somebody else, he'd heard about what had happened to me. He could relate to that through one of his own personal experiences that I didn't know about. But he had heard something had been going on. He then just messaged me, "Are you okay?" Asked one or two simple questions, and it was that. And I just, he suddenly got the full wrath of what was been going on with me. But that then led me to then getting psychotherapy, led me to everything else to now what I do. So I think it's finding anybody, whether that is a total stranger that you sit next to on a bench when you go for a walk, whether that is a colleague, just finding somebody that you can talk to and that just listens, I think is incredible. So find anyone. If someone, just anyone that would listen to you, just find them. And I suppose, just something is to help other people is just listen. That's my biggest tip to if you're thinking about helping somebody else, is just listen. Don't always feel like we've got to fix the problem or provide the solution, because you don't. Actually, what people need more is you just listening and not telling them what to do, because half the time when we're struggling with mental health, it's because we've already lost a lack of control.
So I have one final question for you both. What's one thing you use as your productive outlet to deal with stress or anxiety and just your mental health and well-being? Sorry, that's quite a personal one.
Cool. Well, sourdough definitely plays a part for me. So
you jumped on that bandwagon.
I did. And but I think it was having time. First lockdown, there was such time to do stuff, and And yeah, a bit like tending to plants and things. It's like you can take the time maybe that you didn't have before. So that was sourdough. So yeah, and that is a bit of control, I suppose, but I get such pleasure out of it. Yeah. So there's that. The last one, which I'm such a big believer on, again, and when I tell people, they look at me sometimes, with that kind of look, as if I've got two heads. But I'm hoping Annabelle might be able to, if she agrees with these, might be able to put a bit of psychoanalysis around it. That what I really believe in is self-affirmations. And so I'll have one or two I will have a list, and every morning I'll have a look, and I'll just do some self-affirmations. And and what I've found over the years is if you say an affirmation 3 times to yourself, and if you can say it out loud, you know what, the change it can make you feel is just massive, and just give you that confidence and just make you feel positive towards the day. So
that's brilliant.
That would be mine. That's any good.
Thank you for sharing, Martin.
I suppose the main one for me, and I touched on it then, is creativity. I have to find an outlet to get it out. Otherwise, it will just build up, and then I'm going to blow, and then it's messy. So I think it's finding a creative outlet, and I think that's whether that's through my planting and garden design, whether that's through my lino print, which actually I find really therapeutic as a way because I can design it, I can get whatever I'm feeling out onto the lino print. So that I find really well, or the knitting, because that's quite meditative. I can't say that word, but it's like slow and mindful.
Go wrong.
Yeah, if it goes wrong, then it's total opposite, and then I want to throw it in the canal.
Yeah, that's the same with the sourdough. If it doesn't rise, it's like, oh no, stress levels.
Well, this is it. It's a fine balance with all of them, and if a plant doesn't grow, then that's why I like plants, because it's a shame. And with all these things, if it doesn't go right, it's not the end of the world. Whilst it feels like it at that second, it's not. So it's still building our resilience.
And on that note, I'd like to say thank you very much to both our wonderful guests for agreeing to be part of the first episode of Hort Talk, an HTA podcast. I hope you both had a lovely time.
No, it's been a pleasure. I've loved it. I just feel we've had a great hour or so, whatever. I don't even know how long we've been chatting, to be honest, but it's been wonderful. Lovely to see and meet you both.
Thank you very much.
It's just been, as you say, it's just been a pleasure. It's been great fun. It's nice just to have a chat about an important topic, but just a fun chat with two great people. And I'm going to come off it buzzing now. I'm really happy.
Brilliant. Well, we've had our own little therapy session. So thank you to everyone who's listened to our podcast today. We hope you join us for the next one. And don't forget to take care of yourselves.